welcome to Actual Spinster. I'm filming slightly differently because this is just easier. Today I'm just gonna do my September wrap up. I did not read very many books. Honestly, like I've just been actually just very overwhelmed, I think. Like very overwhelmed. And yeah, I mean, I also thought I would talk a bit about some of the books that I've made some progress in but I haven't like finished. Because I do feel like part of the reason why maybe I haven't finished is because I started quite a lot and I've like got into them, but yeah, just haven't got through to them. But I'll start by talking about the books that I did read, like finish. And yeah, and also I did do like a project from the sort of last week or so of August into September, which was it was called Virago season, and the idea was to read Virago books because they publish and have published a whole bunch of women, and they have various different, like, you know, they have more I mean, I think technically this is still actually a modern classic, but you know, they have the green spines and the non-green spine ones, and they have like some more recent publications and some like older classics and modern classics. So yeah, I will leave a link to the video where I talk about that if you're interested, because I mean, you know, obviously you can always do it, and or you know, I might try to do it like every year now in Virago season, pick up a Virago. Yeah, the first book I finished was not a Virago book. It was called Threadripper by Amalia Smith. I think it was translated from the Danish by Jennifer Russell. I don't have it with me, which is a shame because it's an interesting book as a object. It's kind of about like a scattering of things, but I guess the specific focus is on technology slash textiles as a kind of technology slash like kind of deconstructing that, like, oh, textiles is, you know, a form of making, and technology is, I don't know, all happening in cyberspace or whatever, and actually seeing how deeply interconnected they are as processes and as things that kind of developed as the other developed. You know, technological advancement led to textile advancement led to technological advancement. It is about Ada Lovelace as well, and yeah, kind of like ghosts in a way. It's quite like scattered, and it tells these two kind of, not really stories, but I guess like frames at the same time. So each page has one page number for both sides of the page, which I really liked. I love that experience and kind of like playing around with form. One side of it was more kind of like directed, clear research, historical, like, I don't know, analysis or like facts, talking about textiles and Penelope weaving her loom and then unweaving it at night, that kind of thing, and also the development of like algorithms and Ada Lovelace and the computer and bugs in the system. And then on the other side was this almost like research journal of the author or the speaker, the narrator, whatever, going to various places and either doing research or like trying to create a piece of fabric using like various colors and textiles and machines, creating an algorithm. There's also some like Ada Lovelace letters in there as if spoken by an AI algorithm thing. Yeah, and there's also some pictures as well, like some images, which were interesting to see too. It's kind of like an ode to sort of human fallibility in a way. Like, for however long there's been technology, there's always been bugs in the system. And like bug not coming from insect, although obviously that's like a great metaphor, and sometimes it was like literal. There was like a moth, for example, in this like computer program, I think, but bug as in a kind of like a hobgoblin, I think was the etymology, a kind of like spirit that's mischievous. So yeah, I definitely did enjoy it. I actually did enjoy it less than I thought I would, because when I first heard about it and I saw the title and the cover, it just seemed really, really great, and like it was interesting. It just wasn't as like great as I thought it would be, in part I guess because it's like kind of a bit slight, but I did like a lot of what I was saying, even if I felt like in a way it was kind of trying to like depoliticize some of the stuff, which, you know, I don't think you can do, considering technological advancement is often like extremely capitalist and imperial, and like that was never really engaged with at all. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it if it sounds like something you're interested in. Right, next I did read a Virago book, which is good because I was worried at one point that I would just not read any, and like that would be very embarrassing. Of course, it is the one, like the one I started with and finished first was the one that I was like, I probably won't read this, but blah blah blah. But anyway, that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which has this incredible cover. And I mean, I feel like everybody has probably talked about how brilliant this book is, but it's brilliant. And the way it's written is so evocative. I mean, the opening especially is incredible and so redolent with sense and presence. It just stays with you. I really enjoyed reading this, and I'm so glad that I finally read it. I'm also really looking forward to picking up My Cousin Rachel, which I have heard is better than Rebecca and also like gayer potentially, so that's next for my du Maurier reading. I don't know, I feel like everybody has read this, but I, you know, and like knows it, but basically it's about this unnamed narrator. Also, like, oh my gosh, I was like obsessed with trying to figure out what the name of the narrator was, because like she leaves like a couple clues of like, oh, it's quite hard to pronounce, and like her father's name was blah blah, like she doesn't say exactly her father's name, but she, you know, talks a bit about it, and like every now and again I'd be like, oh, do you think I could figure it out? Which like is a hilarious thing for me to think, considering like I don't think anybody's figured it out, have they? Or like, did she ever even say? I really dislike Maxim. Like, I mean, he treats the narrator like shit basically a lot of the time, and then it's like, oh, but I love her. Also, he's so much older than her. It's all a bit gross, but I think it's a great book. I had actually watched the film with Lily James. I actually also had watched the Hitchcock film, I think, when I was younger, because I was in like a production of it at school, and that's when I tried to read it first and I found it really boring and I just gave up. But yeah, so I was like in a play, and I think we watched the film to talk about like suspense and drama. So yes, anyway, I did know, like, I knew the plotline, I knew the story, and one other thing I wanted to say, oh yeah, well, maybe I won't say that because maybe it's a bit spoilery, but I would definitely recommend this if you had your eye on it and you're like, oh, everybody's read it but not me, well, you should just read it. Then the next book I read was also a Virago book, and was The Group by Mary McCarthy, which I am really glad that I finally read. Yeah, this is like from the 30s, and actually this is set in the 30s even though it was written in the 60s. And then another book that I was reading was also written in the 60s, so I feel like a lot of them are kind of like in a similar headspace in a way. I mean, not quite obviously, but yeah, and they're also in different like geographical places. And the one that was written in the 60s by HD, like, this is not set in the 60s or the 30s, it's set in like the 1910s. But anyway, I will talk about that a bit later because I have done some reading of it. But yeah, The Group. This is another book that has also been like on my shelf for ages. I've wanted to read it for ages. I've heard it's kind of a classic. Just got makeup on it, well done me. And it follows 8 graduates of Vassar College, which I think is like near, was it Yale or Harvard? I can't remember. Anyway, it's like a women's college in the 1930s in New York. Yeah, they've all graduated and stuff, and it just kind of like follows each of them. I don't think I necessarily found it like that convincing in terms of like all of those 8 characters. I don't feel like I know them equally, and I feel like a lot of them kind of like randomly showed up and then left, and I was like, oh, okay, so am I supposed to care like that deeply about this character? So I did end up giving it sort of like 4 stars. But I thought it was really interesting, and it does have like a really frank, I would say, discussion of like sexuality and also contraception, which it was really fascinating to read, you know, like, and also just reproduction in general, I guess, but specifically those things. There's like a really memorable scene where one of the women, Dottie Renfrew, I think it was, she goes to a clinic to get a contraceptive to get birth control, and yeah, like it was just really interesting to read that, and I didn't really expect it to be that explicit about stuff like this. I actually also rewatched Mona Lisa Smile recently because I do love that film, even though like it's not a good film, and also it's very fucked up in some of its framing, but like that's set in the 1950s, not the 1930s, but it is at this like women's college, and Juliet Stevenson plays like a really sexy gay nurse who gives the students contraceptives, which is great, and they do also talk about contraception and birth control in it, and I actually did feel like there was quite a lot of like correlations between the two the two medias or whatever. I also think that the Mona Lisa Smile like fits into my like books about and TV shows and stuff about academia kind of like urges to watch and consume things like that. But anyway, back to The Group. Yeah, so yeah, I definitely did feel like sometimes I struggled to remember which character was which, but I also thought it was great, and I do think that the way this nods to queer women is interesting, and you know, there's a very, I mean, there is queerness in it in multiple ways, but also specifically one woman, but I also kind of wish that she had actually been more present in the narrative, but in a way she sort of, that's kind of why, like, her queerness is why she's not in it. until she is. But yeah, she was like very sexy, and she went to Europe, of course, because like Europe and gays or whatever. But yeah, like it was, yeah. Trying to think if I have anything else left to say, but I don't think I do. Definitely interesting to check out if you're interested in kind of like women's lit from the past, you know. Like I found it really interesting that it was like so popular, because it was really, really popular. And then I know that Mary McCarthy was also sort of talked about as this like classically feminine writer, and maybe she is, I don't really, you know, whatever, but I just think that was very interesting. So yeah. So those were the 3 books that I did actually finish in September. The books that I read consistently but I haven't finished, one of them was Bid Me to Live by HD. I'm now about 40 pages away from the end, and you know, part of me wanted to finish it yesterday, but it's like, I guess like a non-modernist and like a more linear novel is like taking sips of water. You know, you can sit down, you can read a bit of it, you take a sip, you're finished, you know, it like makes sense. There's a beginning and ending, a middle, like the drink is over, the drink is beginning again for each scene, like whatever. I hope this is gonna make sense. But this novel, and a lot of modernist novels, is like somebody brings you a basin of water and then you just stuff your head in it and you try to make sense of the world that you see underwater, and then you surface because you desperately need to breathe, and then you do it again, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted, I can't keep going. So then you take a very, very long break, and then you know, again you're like, that basin looks very interesting, I wonder what I'll see if I put my head inside of it. And then you do it again. So yeah, that's how I've been feeling about reading this book. It's also because HD was a poet, which also like obviously massively affects that. You can definitely tell she was a poet like in this, and like an imagist modernist poet no less, you know. But I would say like it's really good. It's just it takes a lot for me to read, and you know, I'm not really in a particularly intellectually present place right now because I'm very overwhelmed, and I'm also trying to like sort out my other projects, and this is not part of that, so I'm not keeping aside Spoon specifically for it. But hopefully I will finish it soon. I have also started listening to this other book called Square Haunting, which has like a whole section on HD, but I'd like to finish that book before I listen to the chapter on her, because like this is in some capacity about her life, and I kind of want to like read from her own words before I like learn her actual like biographical, you know, facts of her life, especially because sometimes that doesn't matter, right? Like sometimes it's just about the emotional truth that you feel, and it's not about what has necessarily actually happened to you in a shared reality. It's what happened to you in your emotional landscape. Anyway, yeah, but that is Square Haunting, and it's also kind of about like Virginia Woolf and Jane Ellen Harrison and Eileen Power and Dorothy L. Sayers, and I've listened to like maybe half of it so far, and it is really interesting. So that's also, I guess, part of this. I forgot that I was reading that though, so I wasn't planning to talk about it, but yeah. It's by Francesca Wade. It's been on my TBR lookout list for a while, and I found an audio copy, so. Then the other book, which I have spoken about in quite a few videos, that I have read some way through, I guess now I'm over halfway, is The Idiot by Elif Batuman. I think I kind of stopped reading this, because it just stopped being what I was like in the mood for in a way. That's not because I'm not enjoying it, like I do actually really like it. I also think part of it is that like I found it like a bit too close to home. Like some of my relationships I was like, oh no, this is how that person treated me, or like, wow, this is exactly like the relationship I have with blah blah blah, which, you know, can be nice to read but is also quite like intense. I hope to finish it soon. I think part of me not reading this has been that like I still do have quite a chunk left, and part of me is like I just need to like finish some books in order to like not be as stressed, but then I'm not finishing books, and it's kind of like maybe I should just commit to a longer book and finish that instead. But yeah, anyway, whatever. That's kind of why I would also really like to finish this. I also was sort of vaguely like reading or like attempting to maybe read some things for Shorty September, but like because I didn't finish this, and then it all kind of snowballed, so I didn't really do that. Aside from, I did kind of think, I mean, I kind of wanted to finish this in September, but I'm fine that I didn't. And this is Diane de Prima's Revolutionary Letters, which is a collection of her poems. I have been reading at least one of these every day, which has been a really enjoyable experience, and I would definitely recommend that. I have also been, you know, some days reading more than that. Ugh, these poems are just so good, you know. Often I just read one and I'm like, oh, Diane, how could you do this to me? In fact, I literally just read, before I started filming, Revolutionary Letter 75, I think, and I was like gonna cry, and then I was like, oh no, like yeah, she's just really wonderful. And I you know, obviously not every poem is a hit, but so many of them are, and they speak to the reality that I live, the reality I want to create in such like a deep and meaningful and accurate way. It's how can you not be just like so enthralled and so ensparkled by it? That is not a word, but like illuminated, made more alive by reading it. One of the reasons why I thought I would talk about the books that I have read chunks of but haven't finished is because I do think that that is something that I will begin to do a bit more as the months go on, because I think my reading will become a bit more kind of chunky in a way. Sorry about those noises. And I don't think I'll be necessarily reading books from cover to cover. I think generally like fiction books are still stay the same, but because I think I will be reading more non-fiction, I probably will read less fiction generally, and then the non-fiction I do read, I'll probably read like, you know, a chapter from this. You know, I do also have like institutional access to a lot of stuff now, so like if there's something that you can't access, definitely message me and I can try and get you like a PDF copy or something, because it should be available to everybody. Right, I think that's everything. I'm just gonna mention it again because just in case, but I did make a new YouTube channel which is just gonna be for like talking about my knitting. So I already made my first knitting podcast on there, so yeah, I will leave that in the description box if you're interested and you want to check that out because you like hearing about textiles. I did actually read a Diane de Prima poem in my first episode. I think that's everything I wanted to say. I hope you're having a good day when you see this, and I will talk to you when I next talk to you. And I'm sorry for the slightly reduced like sound and image quality. I don't have spoons to do this in another way, you know. Alright, bye.